Cleric is definitely one of the strongest, if not the strongest classes in all of D&D 5th edition. And there's a lot of great subclasses to choose from. So today we're going to talk about our top 3 subclasses. We're going to tell you which one's our favorite. Stay tuned.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another JNJtabletop video. The way that we are going to determine what we believe to be the best subclasses is that we're going to look at the following criteria. Number 1, we're looking at raw power, and that's typically going to be combat oriented. Number 2, we want to see if the subclass enhances what the base class is trying to do. It doesn't take away or encourage poor decision making for what a cleric is actually known for. And for the most part, a cleric is known for being a support class. Now, they do a ton of other things like tanking, damaging, depending on what subclasses you're going to look at, battlefield control. So this is going to be pretty broad. And then last but not least, we want to know, does the subclass help deliver on the fantasy of either playing the cleric or the specific fantasy that the subclass of this cleric is selling you on? During this process, we're also going to be avoiding a few things. So if there's overlapping subclasses, like say maybe there's 2 or 3 subclasses that seem to sort of do the same thing, we're just going to pick the best one there and ignore the others. We're also going to basically be ignoring role-playing and multi-classing as criteria for this, because every class really has a path to a good story that you can tell. And if you're multi-classing, it kind of defeats the purpose of examining each thing individually, because that's what we're doing here in the video. And at the end, we may have some honorable mentions, but we're going to present our candidates in alphabetical order, and then you're going to have to watch at the end of the video. You know, there's no skipping around. I know how this works, but if you want to know the order that we're putting our candidates in, you got to wait till the end of the video.
So as we said, we're going to start this off alphabetically, and that's going to bring us to the life domain cleric. First things first, the raw power of the life domain is just strong. I mean, that heavy armor proficiency is just really nice to have just for free with the subclass. Disciple of Life makes all of your healing spells better, and that's the triple play, baby. You know, like that's raw power, enhance on what the class is supposed to do, delivers on the fantasy. It gives you all 3 of those with just one ability. I think Blessed Healer is really cool too. It allows you to heal an ally and yourself at the same time, which empowers you to be both a better healer and a better tank, which, again, 2 things that people see clerics as. I also think Spiritual Weapon baked into your prepared spell list is just really good and really nice to have.
Yeah, there's so many just really good foundational things. And when you talk about the spell list with Spiritual Weapon, it's like every single option there on the spell list is probably something you want to prepare anyways. And I guess there's 2 ways to look at it. If you look at it in the negative, it's like, why are you giving me this for free? I'm going to prepare it anyways. It's like, yeah, you don't have to choose it. Now you can pick something else up that would be useful. Like maybe you're better able to prepare for a situation you know that's coming. So you take a spell that you normally wouldn't, but it's perfect in that niche use that it has, and you don't have to sacrifice things like Bless or Cure Wounds or Spiritual Weapon or Revivify, any of these things on the list. It's kind of just incredible. It's like you have the things you need and the nice to haves. You're always ready.
Yeah, as far as delivering on a fantasy too, I mean, your idea of a cleric is a healer, which I think is a lot of people's idea of a cleric is a healer. Nothing delivers better on a fantasy than a life cleric. And you brought this up before, Jake. Like it's also the most classic design.
Yeah, if your roots are in old school D&D, like my first edition was a blend of first and second edition together, the life cleric just feels like the cleric did in its roots. So if you're looking for that old school classic healing frontline, really the life cleric is incredible for that. So moving on, next up we have the light domain. And when we talk about raw power, this spell list is just oozing with fiery offensive potential. I mean, you're talking about fire damage all over the place, AoE effects all over the place. And because of that, it's particularly useful in a group that might be short-handed. So maybe you don't have that wizard, or you don't have a sorcerer, or like maybe a druid, or somebody that's looking to just handle mobs and do things like fireball. That's the answer, right? Whatever the problem is, in Dungeons and Dragons, you shoot it with fireball. Well, the light cleric can do that. And then finally, For raw power, Radiance of the Dawn, their channel divinity at low levels, it's incredible. In a 30-foot radius, you attack every hostile creature that you want to, and you can deal 2d10 damage to it. Like that's a game changer in the right situation. You're an agent of like pure light.
The light domain is definitely super powerful when it comes to just that raw power. And also when you're talking about just how that subclass enhances things, man, I think about warding flare. That just ups your tanking ability by like, I don't know, like 30 feet. The fact that you could the fact that you could have people re-roll attacks against you from up to 30 feet away, and then once you hit 6th level, it doesn't have to be you. You know, they could attack somebody else and you could have them re-roll. That's pretty nice. That's pretty dang nice. And Fairy Fire as an option, as just a spell that you get with it. Fairy Fire is just always good. When you look at clerics as a support class, giving them options to Fairy Fire or access to Fairy Fire, it's just going to make that better.
Absolutely. And if your vision of a cleric is I'm going to call down fiery judgment on my enemies and the enemies of my god, like these are servants of the light. Like this is the night is dark and full of terrors and I'm going to burn them all up. This delivers on that perfectly. Like perfectly. It just takes every like awesome fire spell that the wizards and sorcerers gets. It's like, hey, here, you know that great spell list you have as a cleric? Yeah, you could do like all the cool stuff that wizards can too.
Yeah, and if I could put my my Bible hat on for a second too, you know, when I think of a light domain cleric, I think of 2 Kings chapter 1. I think of Elijah calling down fire on the captain and his men. If I be a man of God, then call fire down on, like that's what this is.
There's so much inspiration, like all over the place for this.
And that's going to bring us to our final choice, which brings us to the letter T. And T, of course, is for Tempest. So Tempest is just filled with raw power. I mean, you get proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor, and that's going to allow you to fight pretty much just as well as most martial classes, but you're also a primary caster. And that's pretty huge. That's really huge.
At level 1.
At level 1, yes.
This is great.
Wrath of the Storm, as well, is just an action economy dream. I'll just read through it quickly. We'll probably pop it up on the screen too. When a creature within 5 feet of you that you could see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to cause the creature to make a dexterity saving throw. The creature takes 2d8 lightning or thunder damage, your choice, on a failed saving throw, and half as much on a successful one. Attacking a Tempest Cleric has consequences.
It's got like 1.21 gigawatts of consequences. It's like fantastic. But you know how much we love Action Economy here. And if you haven't watched our Action Economy series, I would highly recommend it because we talk about different reactions, bonus actions, movements, and all sorts of ways that you can just dominate combat. But if we're talking about how the Tempest Cleric enhances what you're looking to do, you don't have to go any farther than Destructive Wrath. That's your channel divinity that just lets you do what you're doing, right? So let's just say, for example, you use your Wrath of the Storm on an enemy that attacked you. It's like, oh, you hit me? Cool. How much damage did you do? 6? Great. I'm going to just max out the 2d8 because my channel divinity lets me max out thunder or lightning damage anytime I roll it. It's like, great. On your action, you gave me 6 points of damage and I gave you 16. How's that working out for you? It's just an incredible subclass. So speaking of biblical references, you know, with the storm, Jesus did peace be still. This is kind of like still be peace. What's the opposite of peace be still? Because that's what this Tempest Cleric does on your enemies. And I think that's an incredible way to do this. When we talk about delivering on the fantasy, Josh, what do you got?
Yeah, as far as delivering on a fantasy, I mean, I think this is going to be true for a lot of the cleric domains, but the spell list here just supports this class so well. If you're imagining a Tempest Cleric as some sort of god of thunder with an electric personality, just handing out storms of thunderous fury like candy, this is it. And that spell list is really what allows you to do that. So yeah, I would say it delivers on that fantasy pretty well.
Especially when you consider, and unless I did this wrong, which I don't think I did, on D&D Beyond, if you just go to the cleric page and then check off lightning or thunder, the only spell that pops up is Glyph of Warding. You take something that you couldn't do, and this sells you on the fantasy and turns it up to an 11. I love the Tempest Cleric.
Yeah, I do too, Jake. And it's funny, we talked about the letter T and the clerics. As we get into the rankings, I think maybe it's time that we give an honorable mention, something that a lot of people are probably upset about for some reason. Tell us about our honorable mention and why it's an honorable mention today.
We're going with the Twilight Domain Cleric, and the reason why we put it here is because we believe it has the best channel divinity in the cleric options that are out there. And that's no small feat because there's a lot of really good ones out there. But if we are being honest, as we evaluated and prepared for this series, it felt like that was kind of the one thing that subclass did that was really kind of a game changer. But we understand that a lot of people are going to disagree with us, and actually I would love to hear stories about why the Twilight Cleric should be on this list and why it's broken and all those kinds of things. But that's our honorable mention, and really we did that just for you. So Josh, I think it's time for our rankings. So who do we put in the number 3 slot for our cleric?
So the number 3 slot, it's number 1 in my heart, and it's definitely going to get an accolade here. That's the Life Domain Cleric. Life Domain Cleric, in my opinion, it's the best delivery of a fantasy. Not necessarily the strongest, but I mean, we talked about it before. When you think about that cleric, you think about that healer, you think about that tank. It just gives you all of the tools to do that so well. So while it's not necessarily the strongest, when I think of a cleric, I think of a Life Domain Cleric.
Yeah, it's easily one of the most classic ways to play the game. Which brings us to number 2, which we put the Light Domain Cleric here because you can shoot things with Fireball, and that's pretty cool on the Light Domain. Like, if you're talking about classic cleric fantasies, whether you're that classic divine, healing, helpful cleric like the Life, or you're going destructive, righteous fury, that's what you get with the Light Domain. And it also just gives you access to like all of the classic offensive spells that normally you have to be a wizard or a sorcerer to use. It just ramps up the offensive power of the cleric so much, and we had to put it here.
There's only one left now. That means number 1 is Tempest.
Yeah.
I mean, we already talked all about it. Tempest just, it gives you such a strong power. You're able to maximize that damage that you do so much of with your spell list and with your abilities being so lightning and thunder focused. Having that channel divinity where you could just max that out. That's huge. Having the martial weapons and the heavy armor, like all of these things individually are very big. When you put them together, it's just an insanely powerful and really fun subclass. So that's why we put it as number 1.
That's right, but we want to know what 3 subclasses you would choose for the cleric if you were making a video like this, and then tell us why in the comment section. And if you'd like, we did this for the Bard, and we did this for the Barbarian, and we're going to continue doing this series as time goes on and 5e comes to a close. So thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, maybe hit the like button and give us emojis to represent your favorite clerics that you would pick in the comment section.
Yeah.